When we were kids, we all had our go-to happy place, our escape. We gravitated to art, movies, bands, musical, or books. Something that did not make us feel alone, but empowered us in a world of love, magic, and adventures. Come with me as we explore the wizarding world with William Phoenix. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to yet another episode of Wizarding with William Phoenix. On tonight's agenda, we have one of the biggest topics that there is on this run, and we're going to be talking about the mythology. And when I say mythology, I mean how different mythology of our world was used and incorporated into the wizarding world of Harry Potter. From Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Buddhism, all sorts of, when JK wrote this, she tapped into all sorts of different places all around the world, made it her own, or just straight up transfixed it into it, like the Phoenix. That's, right there in your face. There's no subtlety to it. And see how much we can touch up on. Now, for this week, by some wonderful miracle, I was able to ask the beautiful, wonderful Lexa Adams to join me again, welcoming her back to the show, Miss Lexa Adams. Good evening.
I'm back.
And thank you. Thank you again for joining us. And I know that you have, between life and cosplays and pinups, you are here, there, everywhere, and then some. There and back again.
Unfortunately, I don't have a time turner to make it a little easier.
Oh my God, kid, that would be so great. Can you imagine that? Everybody having their own little time turner. Like, I need to go back a few hours. Okay, cool. Oh, I need to go back to high school. All right, cool.
No, I would just be productive and actually get sleep somewhere.
Yeah, that too. So, mythology. A wonderful, wonderful time. Where do we even start? Because there's so much involved in this. And I'm not going to lie, I'm going to cheat a little bit today because living in New York, I had the wonderful opportunity to go to the Historical Society Museum and Library when they had the Harry Potter: A History of Magic exhibition. And I ended up getting the book, which kind of played into this whole series because I'm like, oh, if I ever get the breakdown of it or if I ever do anything like it, I actually have this. Which it covers everything, like this potions and alchemy, which we've already touched on a different episode. Well, you were there. We have herbology. We have the creatures, which I think is what we're going to be touching on the most. But then we also have some of the characters, like Peeves, like nearly Headless Nick. All these, like the giants come from one mythology, but then you have the Phoenix that comes from a different mythology. So I think we should start with the most well-known and start with the creatures, because the creatures are very rampant, very, they're all over in Harry Potter, as we all know. So I think that's the more broad and the one that people can identify with the most. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and especially with Fantastic Beasts, it's definitely in the forefront right now, whereas in the original series, they were kind of just used here and there, and there wasn't necessarily too much backstory given to a lot of creatures and characters and everything, unless at the time you had picked up the Hogwarts library set and had read through Fantastic Beasts. But now we're branching in, and you have characters like Newt, kind of shedding light onto the fact that these are more than just creatures.
Exactly, and you have, like, even in the last one that just came out, Crimes of Grindelwald, we're introduced to what's the name? That big Chinese cat-like creature, which
right.
Yes. Which goes to show that, there are creatures from all over the world. It's not just, because then we have the Phoenix, and the Phoenix is from the Egyptian mythology, and then also in part the Greek mythology. What I love about what J.K. did is that she didn't just take from one. She looked around. She literally did her homework. And, and she found the best ways to incorporate whatever mythology suited her the most. And there's so many that, she created an entire world. She created an entire universe. There's Buckbeak, there's Aragog, there's the dragons. Like even the owls have their own. They're not mythological creatures, obviously, but they have their own myths and legends behind them.
Mm-hmm.
So much work went into creating this that it's so hard to even prepare a breakdown on it.
Right.
Like I said,
yeah, the creatures is really the largest portion of mythology that we can really look into in the series, because when you think about it, we see more diversity culture-wise in the creatures than we do in necessarily any other aspect. As we had spoken about in our last episode together about, say, like Russian magic or Chinese or Brazilian or French or anything like that. These are all like areas that have their own cultures, and we don't necessarily see a lot of that brought to the forefront in the series directly necessarily. Now there are, obviously we do learn a little bit about the different schools in different areas, but that's like mostly through Pottermore and a lot of forums and everything like that. So creatures has got to be her favorite thing to have created in this whole series, because there's so much that really went into it.
And she put in so much time and effort, and and she managed to find a way to make all these different animals and beasts from all around the world mesh so well together.
Mm-hmm.
Like you go from one scene, you have the Phoenix, and then the next scene you'll have the werewolf. Now they don't come from the same mythological background. They don't even come from the same country. But yet she was able to make them, I don't want to say like coexist, but put them all in this magical world and make it work. Because there's been times where people tried to mesh different things and it just did not work.
Well, I think the way that she does that is a lot of, say, with the dragons. Now, we know dragons have been recorded in mythology across multiple cultures. So a lot of these creatures are general things that are acknowledged in every culture, but called different things in different cultures. So instead of saying like, oh, all of this, these are all creatures from one area, this is how we know them, she pointed out, this is known from here and this is known from there and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that is very true. And it's funny because, like, for example, I'm looking at the book, and I just happened to be scrolling over like the mermaids. When we think mermaids, especially living in Orlando at the time, but we're thinking mermaids. We're thinking, oh, Ariel's gonna have a cameo in here.
Well, that's what the normal person thinks. I'm over here thinking sirens and, drowning sailors.
That too, but I mean, that's more the way that she went. She didn't go for the happy-go-lucky Disney-fied mermaid, she went for the original look because, like, as you know, mermaids originally were not loving, caring 16-year-old redheads trying to get feet.
Right.
Mermaids were exactly what you said. They were half women, half fish, which would sing and mesmerize sailors and bring them to their doom because they would have them sail their ships into rock. And the mermaids that we have in Harry Potter are not exactly friendly. They're not, you know what I mean? She went with the original lore of
right, especially even having them singing at one point to them. So
that is true. And you know, like, unless you put like, you know, when he has the egg and he has to put it in the water to actually hear them sing, you get like that loving, caring voice that again the sailors would listen and follow.
Yeah, you get that siren song.
Exactly.
But she also kind of counters it with pointing out, like, if you try and listen to it outside of the water, it's just screeching. You wouldn't understand it.
It would be like a fish out of water.
Ba-dunch.
And then you get the beautiful, wonderful, gorgeous unicorns, which are, if you haven't Googled the Scottish national animal, go ahead and do that. You're welcome. Because, spoiler alert, it is in fact a unicorn. It says Orlando Furioso. Yeah. And then you also have Buckbeak, which is the hippogriff. And again, completely different lore. I loved how it looked on screen.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was very well done. And you know, there's like this mythologies behind all this. There's stories, there's adventures, there's all sorts of different I can't think of the word right now. Hang on. There's all sorts of different outcomes depending. You could use the same creature, but then depending on which mythology it comes from, the outcome and the reasoning behind it could be completely different. Could be something that in a different society is something horrible. Hagrid himself, going, you know, starting to touch a little bit on the characters. Hagrid is, you know, by comparison, he's a giant, and giants were definitely in very different mythology. He's a half giant, but the half that we're talking about is the giant part, because, you know, the other part's human or not giant. And where do we find giants? I mean, we find giants everywhere. There's a 300-foot giants. Those are skeletons that they say that belong to a 300-foot giants found in Sicily. Germany has a whole lore about giants. The Norse mythology.
The ruins at one point. Oh God, I can't remember where they were, but the ruins were. It's like some absurdly long stretch of land, and if you see the structures, they're massive, and it's like, why would you build something this tall if, you know, your average person's 6 foot, yet you have an entryway that's 100 feet tall?
It's, you know, it's funny because people are always like, if you had a time machine, what would you go back and do? And I mean, other than going back and finding my 18-year-old self and telling him to buy all these stocks to make myself rich, another thing I would do is like go back and try and find what is mythology, what is not mythology. Like, what is real, what is not real? Like, were there ever really giants? Were there ever really these, you know, 100 feet tall people that roamed around the earth? And if so, where did they go? Why are they no longer here? Are they hiding? Who knows? And then another thing that she touched upon in Harry Potter is divination. Divination, though not mythology, has been around for hundreds of years in different cultures. It's the soothsaying, or the psychics, or seeing somebody's future in the cards, like the Torah. Not the Torah. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Tom? Tarot. Thank you.
I have
wow,
a Harry Potter tarot deck. Fight me.
I completely dyslexic that one. My apologies. Tarot cards, not Torah. Trelawney that can see, like in the cup and how the leaves fall. That's another way of divination. The
Bone
ever-loving crystal ball. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Bone casting.
That's another way. And again, these all come from different parts of the world. And she sat down and she incorporated a lot of them. She's like, okay, what works, what doesn't work, what can be used, what cannot be used. We have the reading of the palm, which is another big one.
But you want to know where we dropped the ball, and we talked about it last time?
What?
Ilvermorny.
Yes.
It's like, hey, you have all of this Native American culture that you're coming into. Oh, you're going to do it exactly like something you don't know anything about? Okay, cool.
That is very true. And that seems to, like, I will never take away anything from JK, because we would not be here having this conversation had she not done what she did, and even with Fantastic Beasts. But I will say that it appears that she took a lot more time creating the world of Harry Potter compared to Fantastic Beasts.
Yes.
And I am wondering if she would have had taken the time, and like I said, it's exhausting having written a 7-book series. I get it.
I will give you that, but I will put pause to that right now, because if you know who Cassandra Clare is, that woman, I don't even have all of the books, and I'm already looking at 3, 6, 9. I'm looking at 10 of them right now that's 1, 2, 3 different technical series, all during different time periods, all written within the same years of each other. Like, she was writing 3 different stories at the same time of this fleshed out thing. So, I'm sorry, there's 10 plus books that prove that that is not necessarily the case. No offense to Jo. She gave us our childhood, our upbringing, our friends that we have now, but you dropped the ball.
I will give you that.
I may be a little bitter.
Oh yeah, no, and I totally get it, and I know, like, there are people, and it's, I will never take away from your opinion if that's what if that's how you are and that's what you believe. Absolutely, and to a lesser degree, I concur, because, like I was saying, I think that had she waited to sign on for the movies and written the books, because everybody's different. Maybe she doesn't, because I don't know if she has released anything lately, but Nora Jones has written God knows how many books, and I understand that they are like little romance novels, and it's different than writing an entire book series like Harry Potter. But had she taken time to write Fantastic Beasts out and put in the same, because when you think about it, there's so much detail in Harry Potter and in the world of Harry Potter, like, to this day, people are still finding out things that are like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And Like who would think that when we first meet Snape, the first words out of his mouth, or the first, few minutes, he's telling us that he, what is it? That he dearly misses Lily, or about Lily's death, but we don't figure that out till later on, or you have to be knowledgeable in potions or what he's asking to make that connection. Mm-hmm. That is amazing to do, like the thought process that went into it. And with Fantastic,
I feel that's where it was dropped, though, is we're talking about mythology. This is all stuff that's already been laid out. So you had the forethought to think so deeply into what Snape was saying to point this out, but we're just going to completely glance over big issues. Like, say, cultural differences. I honestly, if we're really going to get into the whole new end of Fantastic Beast, it was very rushed and very for profit, because you got to think, she wrote Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them as Newt Scamander. So obviously she knows. She's put all of this work into it already. This is stuff that's already pretty much pre-laid out for her at this point.
That is true. And it does make a lot of sense. I completely lost my train of thought. I'm with you in the sense of, I wish that she would have taken more time to, like you said, be cultural appropriate to Ilvermorny and to everything else that came with Fantastic Beasts. But what she did with Harry Potter was something which I think has never been done before. Because it's much like, even for like Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is a wonderful series. Mm-hmm. It is like I don't know if you follow us or not, but I've had like conversations with Lewis about it, where it's geared. It's a wonderful series, and I will never take anything away from it, other than say that the Potter fandom's a lot better. But that's neither here nor there at this point.
Right, and it is very much personal preference, but it's also, these are full worlds that have been created.
Exactly, like both of them.
I love Harry Potter to the depths of my soul, to the depths of my heart. If I have one somewhere in there, I love it. I own pretty much everything I own has some sort of connotation to it. I have tattoos. I spend inordinate amounts of money to go just to hang out in the wizarding world. Like, I love it. I do, and I'm not denoting anything that she's put into it, but she's not the only person who's created universes.
She's not.
And to be fair, a lot of the mythology that she sets up in the original series is the same thing that the fans will run with. The fans create a lot of the mythology themselves as well. They expand it. Fans expand Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, Star Wars. We know so much more about the history of these stories through their fan base.
And you're very right. And I like I said, like the point that I was saying was, Lord of the Rings is a wonderful, beautiful world. But when I read it, I was struggling because I was still learning the English language as I read The Hobbit and then Lord of the Rings after. But I felt like it was geared more towards the teens and young adults, as far as it's how it's written and everything that happens. Whereas with Harry Potter, it starts and it's geared towards the younger crowd, like younger than young adults. But it's also written in a way that if you're trying, like, I wish that I would have gotten my hands, or actually it wasn't around back then, but I wish that I would have been able to read Harry Potter as I was learning the English language, because I feel like it was a lot more beneficial to learning in as much as getting lost into it than I did with Lord of the Rings. And to be able to write that and gear it, and so that anybody, at pretty much, if you can read basic books, you know, once you start reading, you know, books more than just kindergarten, to be able to not just read that, but learn without knowing that you're learning, because you're reading about all these creatures and all these people, and like, you know, like astronomy. And for example, like right now I'm looking at an illustration of the mandrake, which again, the mandrake is taken from a Middle Eastern mythology or Middle Eastern history. To be able to do that, and by the time you've finished reading Harry Potter, whether you know it or not, you have learned more than just the story of, well, Harry Potter. To me, is a stroke of genius.
Right, and it's because it's written, it's directed towards children, so it's a book of growth. You're literally, even if you picked up the books as an adult, you're still growing through that growth process of these 7 years of them learning. I mean, you're not just going to hey, I'm going to tell you a story over 7 years, and I'm not going to tell you what I learned, especially when the story I'm telling you takes place in a school. So yeah, I mean, it kind of forces you to learn, which is where I feel like it's kind of not necessarily a fair comparison to Lord of the Rings, because that's not something that spanned over necessarily a long period of time. That world was already flushed out, as opposed to building it with you.
Yes. And like you said, like just like in other fandoms, the fans then took it and kept going with it, and they created their own new characters that then they either fanficked or they cosplayed, or they went or you know they did however they wanted to. I don't know, like the reason why I am like a Potter fan is for these reasons that we're talking about. It's not just the fact that I was able to lose myself in this world, but having read it more into my how old was I? I want to say it was like in my mid to late 20s than as a kid. And having come from a background of like having been raised in Europe, and therefore classes like mythology are something that is taught in schools, or even when I was homeschooled, something my mom taught me. Being able to see all these characters and all these things in it, that growing up I was like, oh my God, like this is you know, like the giants is like, this is Norse mythology. And, you know, then there's the hippogriff, or then there's the phoenix. It's like, I was aware of these differences or these different cultures that became like a melting pot. Now, I'm not saying that the other fandoms don't have that. I'm sure that Star Trek or Lord of the Rings, or if you look deeper into it, you will be, I will learn from it as well. And one of the reasons why, and I know this is going to be a shameless plug, but I'm going to be following Cellar Door very closely, because I want to see where all this comes from and where everything that is going to be covered. But getting lost in Harry Potter as much as I did, and noticing this mythology, and then learning other mythologies, which I didn't even know existed, made it even more enjoyable for me. And it was the fact that it was so easy to read and get lost into while learning all this, which is why I swayed towards, being a Potterhead than, I don't even know what you call a Lord of the Rings fan, but we'll just, call them Hobbit fans.
We're the Hobbitses.
Hobbitses.
Going on an adventure.
After second breakfast, though. But yeah, I mean, what are some, to go on a personal note, what are like some of your favorite creatures or persons that are based on this mythology? I mean, everybody knows that I'm obviously biased, and the Phoenix is my top one, and the way that they made him look, especially on screen, I was overjoyed because, yeah, well, Phoenixes. But what are yours, like some of your creatures that you're like, oh, I absolutely love that?
Nifflers. I don't necessarily think I have a favorite, or even ones that the Nifflers are adorable, and in the second film, how you kind of get a little more personality out of them, they're great. But I think a lot of what I was referencing earlier is a lot of the mythology that I feel, even if it's me learning something new, that I feel like I learned from the series itself, or learned about the series mythology-wise, is a lot of stuff that isn't even necessarily in the books or in the films. It's a lot of stuff from, say, Pottermore, or what other fans have researched into and put out there. It's just, there's so much to touch on, and I think you saying how you learned, or you noticed different things, like the giants in Norse mythology, or the Cerberus from Greek mythology, but it's almost a way to reach out and kind of draw in the people that do know about it, because if you're sitting there and say we were talking about movies, and all of a sudden we're talking about movies you don't necessarily know, or kind of are impartial to, but if I name that one thing that you're going to jump on it. It's going to pull your interest more. So spanning across all these different cultures to pull creatures from is kind of reaching out to that culture and be like, hey, I acknowledge you. You should know about, you know about this, and I know about this. It's going to pull your attention.
Okay. Sorry.
And an analogy that I think you would get. I'm not sure how many other. I'm sure a lot of people watch it that listen to this podcast. But American Gods.
God, I love that show.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for that. By the way, I had no idea what American Gods was until I went to New York Comic Con last year, and they had this entire set, which is, if you've watched the show, it's from season 2, because they were advertising season 2, of like the diner that a lot of stuff happens in. And I'm like, what is this? And I took a picture of it, and Miss Adams over here went nuts over it. She's like, oh my God, I love that show. And then I found out that through my Amazon Prime, I have Stars. So I binge watched, and now I'm all caught up, and I'm not happy. But we'll talk about that on a different time, because we could talk about American Gods, which, again, another show which incorporates so many different mythological gods and people, and it's beautifully done. Oh God, I can't wait for it to pick up again. But and again, that's what attracted me to it. Mythology is something I love, and because the mythology in Potter is so in your face. I mean, there's the subtle one of obviously, but some of it is so in your face that I was just drawn to it, and I'm like, oh, this is great. This is well thought out, and like I'm a creature person, so the unicorns and the hippogriffs are always going to be my go-tos after the phoenixes. Mermaids, not so much, but and then there's the dragons, and who doesn't like to have a dragon and maybe ride one? But now we're getting into another fandom.
Yeah, I'm like, let me just keep my mouth shut on that one.
Ride a dragon, right into Hogwarts.
You had 2 dragons. I thought you had 2 children.
Ooh, oh my God. She gave up a 3-dragon lead. So yes. So if you ever have any interest in learning about mythology, but not actually want to sit through reading books, watch Harry Potter. Pick out. I can guarantee you pick out any pretty much anything in there, and there'll be tons of things that you can learn from, and you can, like even just in the first one, right off the bat, you have the centaurs, you have the unicorns, obviously you have the phoenix.
Well, what I would say is I don't necessarily think it's for someone to learn. I think if someone from like our side, who we are both deeply into different forms of mythology, in both belief and just interest, we could kind of really just use it as an interest point to draw someone's interest and be like, hey, you watched Harry Potter? You thought, oh my God, why am I brain farting on the centaur's name? Amends?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you think Amends is cool? Well, here's the backstory of him and why blah, 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 blah. Or, oh yeah, you know phoenixes, you get the whole concept of the phoenix. Well, here's Fox and blah, 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 blah. It's more of a drawing necessarily than a learning.
Yes. And yes.
Because as we were talking about earlier, it's also which mythology you're following. Because mythology of a pixie in Celtic culture is completely different than a pixie in, say, even really in Scottish culture would be completely different.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You don't want to mix up the two. That's for sure. Because you may end up with, there's some good pixies and there's,
pixies.
Huh?
Cornish pixies.
Yes. Cornish pixies. And then you get like the pixies that you see in Harry Potter, which are just like all over the place and just want to hurt you.
Those are Cornish pixies.
Huh?
That's why I said it.
Yeah.
Parts, right?
Yes.
Yes, those were the Cornish pixies.
Oh. This is what happens when you record episodes at like midnight.
This is what happens when you've been up since like 5 o'clock and had 30 minutes of sleep and then got up and started doing things all over again.
Yeah. But, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to bring our show to a closing. Because we could sit here and talk forever about everything that is in Harry Potter and how one thing leads to another. And, well, for those of us that follow us religiously, you know how some of these shows can just go on and on and on. But I would like to thank you again for joining me, Miss Adams.
Thank you for putting up with me again.
And for those that did not or may not have listened to the first ones, if there's anything that you would like to plug at this time, by all means, the floor is yours.
Well, there's just the pin-up Instagram. It's gonna start branching out into cosplays when I stop procrastinating. It's just gonna be under Lexa Adams, PinchofDapper. We do, with myself and Thank You I Made It, have a event group where we go out and dress up and have different themes between the Universal and Disney parks if you're in the Orlando area, so you can check us out on Boundtown Official on Instagram for that one. And even throw out there for the Bounding Bobbin if you are looking for any Harry Potter themed outfits or any Disney themed outfits. That's your go-to place.
All right. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll be able to get you in for another episode or so. And if not, thank you for your time. And I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Always do.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed today's episode on Mythology of Harry Potter. May you all have a wonderful wizarding night.